MaXXXine.
MaXXXine.
You're a fucking movie star.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Backlot Banter. My name is Tucker Hazel. Today I am joined by my co-host who will do anything to get what he wants, Tanner Dykstra. And today we're here to talk about the exciting conclusion to the X trilogy by Ty West and Mia Goth. That is MaXXXine. With three X's in there.
MaXXXine.
Yeah, we're gonna have to say that every time.
Yeah, that's right.
The character's name is MaXXXine.
That's true.
But the movie is MaXXXine.
Yeah, MaXXXine Minx.
Yes, and we're going to talk about this movie today and give you our thoughts on it as fans of the X trilogy on the whole. And we are here to also listen to you. You know, we consider this a little bit of X therapy.
This is back and forth.
Yeah, so leave comments about your thoughts on this film. You can join our Discord to talk about it there. But Tanner,
Yeah.
we were long anticipating
That's true.
MaXXXine, and now it's been shared with the world.
Uh-huh.
How do you feel about the movie? yeah, losing the title a little bit.
Losing my title
yeah.
a bit. Tucker, I don't think MaXXXine is a good movie.
Okay.
And this is quite unfortunate because we are both quite large fans of the of X and Pearl.
Yeah,
I think those are two very good movies.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was anticipating at least something on that same level of quality. I wasn't expecting this to be really to be blown away by this or this to be the best movie, but I also wasn't thinking it was going to be the worst by a good country mile.
By a pretty significant margin. I
Yeah.
also found myself pretty disappointed in this movie. I was trying my darndest for the first about half of this movie. I'm like, what are people complaining about?
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
I think this is pretty good. I don't really see any major issues, but this film really falls apart in its second act, I think, being kind of stock standard and a little bit boring,
slow.
feels a little rote. And then in the third act, feeling completely out of nowhere, losing a lot of the plot, losing just like threads are going everywhere and are not wrapped up by the end. And the biggest pains that you can say about this movie is that it does not carry forth the same kind of consistent tone, style, and energy that the first two films had.
Exactly.
Where you're watching X and like, oh, this is ripping on Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but doing something really interesting with it and having commentary about the porn industry and things that feel totally fresh. And Pearl obviously feels like it's totally its own thing. And then this film tries to have that, but it fails to conclude that and bring it together in satisfying ways. And where it really misses the mark by, I think, the farthest is that Mia Goth as MaXXXine is not given anywhere near the development.
Completely underserved in this film.
Which is insane. She's the main character.
It's
the film is about her, but it certainly doesn't feel like that.
It carries her character's name, but she easily has the least to do. The least.
It's a minor.
Yeah, exactly.
MaXXXine in name only.
Not very good.
All right.
She has the least to do. She has the least moments because everyone in X and Pearl, everyone talks about these moments where Mia Goth. I always say the wrong thing. Mia Goth gets to like fly off the chain and go crazy and like, oh my god, look how incredible she is in this horror scream queen moment. Yeah. And there's nothing to that nature in MaXXXine.
No. Because Tanner, MaXXXine is not a horror movie, and we were talking about this at the film end. Is like there are. Most of the kills in this movie are off screen, and the handful, if that we get in this film are fine. They're solid.
They're okay.
But the film's horror tone that I think we expected it to have, just at least given the track record of the other films in the trilogy, is entirely lacking. And the moments in which there are kills, there are more tense moments, they come fleetingly, and I think they are fine, but they feel out of place in what is the film's actual tone, which is not a horror movie.
No, it's
just
more
of a neo-noir mystery movie.
Like, I kind of called it, it's like a wannabe neon noir.
Neon noir.
Which is, so this like micro genre that occurred in like the 70s through the 90s, kind of taking advantage of the seediness of these big cities, and that's very much in play here in MaXXXine. We're talking about, the violent, the outbreak of violence in Los Angeles during the 1980s with the Night Stalker is a big plot point of this as we know from the trailers, and then satanic panic is there, and the porn industry is there.
And look, these are great backgrounds for a horror movie.
Sure.
I think that the setup of this movie, I'm all in on. The idea of there being these killings in the background, MaXXXine doing what she needs to, even if it means resorting to violence, and accepting the sort of darker underbelly of the city. Her being someone who is doing strip dances and performing in porn films, as we knew the character from X to do, and the way that combines with the film industry. These are interesting themes. This is a very interesting and unique location to set a modern horror film. The style that goes into recreating the 80s is, I think, well executed. But these are themes and these are ideas that don't feel like they don't coalesce enough to feel like this is something that's very important to this film in specific. And especially by the end of the film, it picks and chooses where it wants its own ideas to go, and then just abandons a bunch of them.
Here's my other thing. I think, Ty West has selected this as the setting for the film, and ultimately, my biggest overarching issue with the film is that it thinks it is more clever than it
definitely.
is. Ty West thinks he's really made something quite clever here, and that you, the audience, and we, the audience, are way too stupid to understand what he's doing. And so he has to spoon feed us the themes and the character points in every single dialogue exchange. I use the word exchange lightly, by the way, because
dialogue exchange with air quotes.
Exactly, because for a lot of this, and this is just sort of a side tangent going back to our Mia Goth complaint, is that
they can be tied together.
A lot of this film, the dialogue, the dialogue sequences are a character talking to MaXXXine, and then she doesn't say anything or do anything, and the scene ends.
Well, sometimes she'll reply kind of quietly in the affirmative.
Yeah. And then it's perplexing because we know her to be this character who is very outwardly spoken, who will not sort of,
take anyone's shit.
She won't take anyone's shit. And this is sort of doled out in a early scene that, we could talk about or we get to in spoilers. It's quite shocking, the most shocking moment of the entire film by far. And then they drop that.
Yeah, that energy completely disappears.
Because she has that confrontation at the beginning of the film. I'll talk about it vaguely just to avoid spoilers. And then there's another moment where she's
It's the ball one.
Yeah, the ball one. She's confronted by Kevin Bacon's character, and she runs away from him.
Yeah,
I thought that was super odd.
Well, she stabs him in one thing, but
and then the following confrontation, she runs. And MaXXXine is not a character who runs away from someone threatening her.
Yeah, and the idea of this film that continually is set up for her character that she will not take a life that she doesn't deserve, and she will do anything that it takes to make sure that she achieves the goal that she has set forth. That is something that you can easily see in X in the way that she defends herself and stands up for herself, and she's not your average scream queen final girl in that movie.
And caving heads in and running
she's
people
great
over.
in that movie. Yeah. But where the script of this film and the screen time of this film goes kind of leaves her in an awkward position where she says she's willing to do anything, and in some ways she does. That people do die and get injured at her hand and because of her actions, but it is not her driving force that feels like it's fueling this movie at all. And so the film actually ends up screen time wise and sort of mind share wise being a lot more about a totally serviceable but largely unmemorable supporting cast.
Yes, I agree.
Which is very expansive and leads to this film kind of feeling like choppy and disjointed. But it's like, okay, here's the section about this side character. Okay, they died. Here's the section about this side character. They've passed.
We're checking back in with our homicide detectives in Michelle Monaghan and Bobby Cannavale. And when I was seeing all these names in the trailer, Tucker, I was like, oh, this is really exciting. We get this expansive cast. We get some bigger names in this. We didn't really have that in X or in. I mean, X. You had
Actually,
you had Brittany Snow, Kid Cudi, Jen Ortega. But that's slasher fodder essentially.
Yeah,
this is like, okay, we're sort of approaching something like an ensemble cast here as Ty West attempts to shift this film series away from slasher and towards like mystery serial killer movie, and completely fails on that front, by the way, because how much of this movie by percentage, Tucker, would you say is committed to solving the case of who is the Night Stalker, who is doing these murders?
It's unclear because from about a third of the way into the film, we're introduced to the detectives who are seeking that out.
Yes.
But they're not particularly interesting characters, and they also don't have a lot of great interactions with MaXXXine. Their dynamic is kind of tenuous. And,
it's very odd.
It's really weird.
Yeah.
And MaXXXine is largely unconcerned with the effects of the Night Stalker.
Even though it is killing her friends, like people that we assume she is friends with, but
we don't really see that impact her.
I also didn't see her talk to these people really. She talks to she has two female friends who she talks to for probably I don't know 2 minutes combined in the film, and then she has her friend who runs like the video store who she also talks to for approximately 2 minutes total.
I mean, he's a slightly more developed character.
Exactly.
He has a little bit of personality. Actually, I like the role that guy played, and he was like a totally fine friend victim character.
But he'd be totally fine if he was like the second or third friend and not the first that we're supposed to care about.
Oh no, definitely, yeah. But the problem is this movie is so concerned with moving forward and jumping from sequence of MaXXXine with Kevin Bacon, sequence of MaXXXine with the director, cutting back to the detectives, cutting back to general 1980s LA satanic panic and riots and things, that it never gives the movie any time to show the impact that any of this is having on MaXXXine, because she's just stone-faced, trudging forward, focused on her goal. But as we mentioned earlier, she doesn't have a ton of agency. She's always being talked at and nodding, and she has very few sequences where she's able to really speak her mind. And so she kind of just feels flat in this movie. And again, Mia Goth doesn't get almost any moments to show her acting chops that we know that she has. I would consider the other two X films the best performances that she's given. And this is not that.
And I just have to think, like, I was thinking about this, so to make us feel for MaXXXine and her friends being killed and stuff like that, is going to be, I was thinking about that while I was watching the film. It's going to be difficult because I don't necessarily have empathy for MaXXXine. She is a psychopath. And this is known. But also the film doesn't lean into that. No, it doesn't. It doesn't lean into her being a psychopath. It doesn't lean into. It doesn't attempt to try and like make you empathize with her. It totally leaves her stranded on an island.
Which actually Pearl succeeded with. Pearl was someone who had these same motivations and same drives for an ability for violence, but she's a character that we empathized with on some level because she was much better characterized. Whereas MaXXXine, the stuff that we learn about her is actually mostly through what I can recall from 2 years ago watching X that had a little bit more characterization and information about her character. But again, the film is much more concerned with side characters here. And then doling out backstory for MaXXXine in like really weird sequences that are super unclear. And then the film kind of tries to backpedal in its last act and like throw a bunch of stuff in your face, and you're like, well,
It's like, the film in the third act, which we should talk about in spoilers most likely. In its third act, it like tries to be like, oh, and this stuff that we set up. I was like, no, you lazily set that up at the beginning of this movie. This doesn't pay off anything that was set up in this, sort of intriguing trilogy of films. You just sloppily threw that in at the beginning of this one, an hour and a half ago, and are pretending that you're like cashing in on sort of some long held knowledge in the series. And again, that goes back to my thing of this film thinking that it's more clever, spoon feeding its audience far too much. In those dialogue sequences, because I really want to hammer this in, particularly present in Elizabeth Debicki's character, who we haven't really talked about, who is this British film director who is helming a 80s garbage slasher sequel, which is already like there seems to be an inbuilt story you can tell there with the director of an 80s slasher. I'm like, and it's like a British woman who wants to like make art. I'm not necessarily sure that matches, that coalesces, but I digress. Anyway, every dialogue scene that she has with Maxxxine is like, listen, Maxxxine, you have to be obsessed with this, okay?
Yeah.
You have to be able to. We have to be willing to murder in this town. You have to be willing to do anything. Are you willing to do anything, Maxxxine? And it's like, we fucking get it, Ty. We understand like Maxxine's characterization. We know that she's a killer. You showed us that at the beginning of this movie and in X.
Yeah.
We know that stuff. And you don't need all of these sequences of characters being like giving a wink and a nudge to the audience, and then not paying that off with Maxxxine fucking doing anything.
No, definitely. And I think that all of this comes together in a film that I think lacks energy, and that's really, especially as you reach the second act of the film, I was realizing that I didn't care as much about the plot. I didn't really care as much about the characters, and I couldn't quite exactly tell the tone and the style that this movie was going for. The other films were very clearly horror movies and built on horror tropes, and the way that they played with that in also different era time periods and things, and different kind of themes in both X and Pearl that I think really gave those films their own identity. This film, I think it kind of wants to be a horror movie because it's in the X trilogy, but it doesn't commit to that. And it wants to be a murder mystery kind of noir film, but it commits to that kind of halfway.
Tom West is just not a filmmaker who makes that. He is a horror director through and through, and that he's, more power to him, striving for something different here, but just simply not giving it the time or the room necessary to grow, and completely misunderstanding the strength of his main star and what her abilities are, and why audiences care about and like seeing Mia Goth do these crazy things in this movie. So, I don't know. Tucker, should we score it and then talk about the ending?
Let's do spoilers.
Okay, spoilers. Here we go.
It's not, to close off. It's not a great movie. I think it is ultimately fine, but just disappointing. Like I think the ending is bad, as we'll talk about in the spoiler section. But I think it has a good start. I think it has a boring but totally fine middle. And so on the whole, I'm like, yeah, it's a fine movie. Like I won't go on the same limb as you and say it's bad. But for this trilogy, yeah, it's bad.
Yeah.
Because it pales so hard in comparison to the other two that made us so excited for this, and then we went like, it feels deflating. But let's talk about that ending. That really is where most of this film's issues.
This is where it like locked into me. It was like, oh, this is not a good movie.
Yeah.
We're completely lost in the slop here. So the ending of this film, the big reveal, Tucker, the Night Stalker, or not the Night Stalker, because the Night Stalker was someone else.
Yes.
But the serial killer that we've been tracking is Maxxine's father.
Yeah.
I was like,
and that's a totally fine reveal because it was established in the previous films that sort of the oppressively religious upbringing and the issues with that be conflicting with Maxxine's goal as a porn star and the guilt that she feels. These are things that were established, and I don't think it is a bad reveal to have the final confrontation be with her father. But it does not work in this film because the amount of emphasis put on her backstory and fleshing that out and making us feel like that is something that is a big part of her character is so little that when the reveal comes that I will admit, I think, good imagery of guy in all black with the leather gloves, like gripping things. I'm like, I thought that was kind of fun and like really corny and leaned into the style at the beginning of the film. But it's like, oh, he's actually kind of just like a frumpy middle-aged guy with like easily the worst performance in the film.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, he's going for it.
But I don't think it's really earned for this character.
No, I would tend to agree. It's like, it seems like an easy thing to make him like the fucking crazy pastor character.
Yeah.
And he says that everyone else is being influenced by the devil and the cult, but in fact, he is leading a cult and stuff.
But the reason why that over-the-top corny performance doesn't work for me is because the film is actually relatively self-serious in its own tone and style, and we're getting, I think, pretty cool stylistic choices like split screen, and there's lots of neon lights, and I think the lighting is good, and we're getting cuts to old footage and things. These are good stylistic choices, but it's taking itself seriously. And when you get to a guy that feels like a Scooby-Doo villain at the end, and he's giving his monologue, and he's got this like setup where the heroine is tied up, and like it feels, and then he's giving this performance that's like
he's selling it. He's swimming, he's bathing in the river of ham.
I just don't think that it works for the self-serious tone that this film was going for, especially because his motivations and plans are so muddy, and like, why did he kill these other people? What is his plan with this film that he's making?
He hates the debauchery of modern Los Angeles, and they're poisoning the minds of blah 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 blah. You get it. Yeah. You get it. I get it. I understand what you're saying. You don't need to lather it on 16 times across an hour and a half. I didn't think that this ending was especially well earned either. Yeah. I mean, I suppose you're right that yes, there is vaguely these things set up in X. Vaguely. But then they cash it in, and then the very beginning of this film is this like home video of Pearl narrated by her father. Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Maxxxine. Of Maxxxine narrated by her father. Same actors,
different characters.
That's right.
Though Pearl actually also had those same
things.
So, like, religious upbringing.
But with her mother.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
Anyway, so it really, to me, just felt like, we're just, like, sort of grasping at some sort of thing to make it feel like a big twist. And it doesn't necessarily feel earned.
It puts a lot of emphasis on this is a big twist. Twist alert.
And you know what? You're like, so obviously Maxxxine and Mia Goth's performance would really pivot here, and she would be obviously shocked and taken aback and, like, acting in these big moments, these big ways at her father being the serial killer.
She doesn't do much of anything.
No,
this third act.
When we cut back to her face after seeing that it's her father, she's just kind of like, whoa.
Well, here's the funniest thing.
Yeah,
it is her father. She knows it's her father. We can guess it's her father based on context clues. We have never seen this guy.
Nope.
This actor, I don't even know if I've actually seen this actor.
I was trying to find him here.
Against him, I think his performance is bad here. Mm-hmm. But the reveal doesn't have a lot of weight, because this character that has been established in vagaries is not instantly recognizable as her father. Mm-hmm. And in the moment that the reveal happens, I mean, when you think about some of the best twist villain reveals in films, I think obviously to something like Darth Vader, who's a character that we've been intimately familiar with from multiple movies at that point, with Vulture in Spider-Man Homecoming, who's a character that had got a lot of screen time in his face, obviously being Michael Keaton, giving a great performance, helps a lot. But I don't know this guy. I don't know what his history with Maxxxine is. I don't know what his goals are. And so then the film, because his character had been sort of like a background force for the entire thing, has to be like, and here he is, here's who he is, here's his goal, and here's the impact of his goal, and he has this cult, we have to establish that.
Yep.
We have to establish the fact that he has this film. Like, there are just so many things that are just boom, 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 like, fed to you, and you're like, whoa, like, I feel like I'm being overfed.
And then the fucking Bobby Cannavale and Michelle Monaghan show up again, and this film ends in a fucking shootout.
A very mediocre shootout.
Very mediocre, not very interesting in execution. And then the very end of this film is Maxxxine kills her father, and fast forward a month, and she's like on set at this film that she was hired to do. And then Elizabeth Debicki's like, "You're gonna be a star. Did you do?" And Maxxine's like, "I feel like it's all coming together."
Yeah. Also, another weird moment of timeline there. We were established that this is 1 month after the ending events of that shootout, and now they're just now having sort of a memoriam for the previous actors.
I
she
don't
was
know.
a part of the family.
Maybe filming shut down for a month afterwards. Maybe.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But the ending of this film is really sloppy, and it's really unsatisfying. And Maxxxine doesn't get a lot of moments, and actually a lot of the moments that you could think about in terms of interesting choreography or iconography are kind of cut around. The final confrontation takes place at the Hollywood sign, which is a totally fine and iconic place to set a film climax. But Bobby Cannavale and Michelle Monaghan run after this guy. We don't see them do anything. They get hurt and / die.
Yeah.
We don't see any of that happen. And then it's just like a bing, bang, boom. Oh, he's on the ground.
It's like...
We don't even have like a big... screaming argument or emotional moment between the two of them. She just like steps on his chest because he's weak and dying at this point.
I also have to say that like Michelle Monaghan and Bobby Cannavale recur a number of times to the point where I was like, are we supposed to care about these characters?
I don't know.
And then they run up to Maxxxine as she's charging up the hill, and she's like, Maxxxine, I'm dying, blah, and then they roll down a hill.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, those guys are gone, I guess.
It's very odd.
Yeah.
10 what do you give Maxxxine?
4.8.
Yeah, I'll be slightly more generous because I do think there are things to appreciate in this. I think most of the actors are doing the best with what they're given. I especially actually think Kevin Bacon gives a really good performance.
We didn't talk about him. Kevin Bacon is a lot of fun.
I think he strikes the perfect balance between that ripping on noir tropes, but also being a funny character.
I mean, he just looks like Jack Nicholson in Chinatown for a lot of this.
I think with what she's given, Mia Goth does totally fine.
Yep.
She doesn't get the crazy moments, but she is a good actress. And I think the cinematography and the style and a good chunk of the editing is all pretty good.
Yeah, it's all solid.
But ultimately, the film ends in a very unsatisfying place. And when it is trying to do its own sort of murder mystery noir film in the middle, it doesn't succeed in that particularly strongly. So I think this is like a 5.9 out of 10. It's above average because I like Mia Goth, and I think that Ty West can direct some cool, stylish sequences, especially in that first act. But that sauce is just swimming in sauce. It's so lost down there.
Yeah. Well, I'd say the sauce is gone. We have no sauce.
Sauceless.
We are sauceless in Maxxxine, unfortunately. But I don't know. We don't really know what Ty West is doing next. I think this is probably the last of the X trilogy.
He did say that he had plans for a fourth one.
Okay.
Where that'll go, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
thanks for watching. I hope our discussion about this film's largely its failings. Hope to shed some light on. It kind of seems like what everyone is thinking. Yeah. Which is unfortunate. Again, you can just go back and watch the other two. They're both still really good.
Yes.
And I still think Ty West is a good director. I think he failed in this one area, but we'll see you guys for his next movie. I don't know what it is.
We'll see you.